Welcome to the debate. Imagine a teenager in a rural European village. They wake up, apply a multi-step Korean skincare routine they bought at the local Rossmann drugstore, put on an oversized hoodie inspired by Los Angeles fast fashion, and immediately check their WhatsApp.
Right, to talk to a friend, 3 time zones away.
Exactly. So looking at that morning routine, we have to ask a fundamental question. Have they lost their local identity, or is the very concept of local just getting a massive global upgrade?
It's a great question, and our source material today establishes a really fascinating premise, which is that human habits, ranging from what we eat and how we sleep to how we think and react, are entirely learned rather than innate.
Yeah, they are built through reinforcement and repetition while we grow up. But the central academic disagreement we're exploring today is, what is the actual engine of that reinforcement in the modern era? I argue that modern globalization and ubiquitous digital technology have fundamentally superseded traditional localized structures. Like, the global network is now the primary architect of human habit, identity, and social connection.
And I argue that this view dramatically overestimates the depth of modern influence. Localized cultural environments and traditional family structures remain the unyielding bedrock of human identity. We might adopt new global conveniences. We might put a new coat of paint on the house, so to speak. But we do not lose our core definition. The underlying physical reality of where and how we live remains fundamentally local, and that is what actually shapes character.
Let's look at the sheer scale of the shift, though. The material makes it undeniable that human habits are currently undergoing a massive global homogenization, and the engine of this is technology.
Sure, technology plays a huge role.
But the internet isn't just described as a tool in our text. It's framed as the ultimate need, something strictly vital for mankind today. But I want to move past just the digital space, because globalization has physical manifestations that rewrite our daily, tactile habits.
Right.
Think about the accessibility of those Korean skincare products at a local European drugstore, or the explosion of fast fashion. A person sitting in a remote town can purchase and wear the exact same style of clothing as a teenager walking down the street in Los Angeles.
Yes, they can buy the same shirt.
But the mechanism of habit formation used to be watching what your parents did and copying it. Now the stimulus we react to is a global feed. The behavioral reinforcement is instantaneous, and it comes from everywhere on Earth all at once.
I hear the scale of what you're describing, but we have to distinguish between surface-level aesthetics and foundational human character. The fact that a physical product crosses a border or that someone clicks add to cart does not mean the soul of the person using it is fundamentally altered.
It doesn't?
No. Our text explicitly claims that while the world becomes more modern and advanced, the meaning of family and what it stands for remains exactly the same. Character is still strictly shaped by blood, heritage, and the friction of local geography.
But how can character remain untouched if every daily input is changing?
Because globalization has completely failed to erase deeply ingrained, highly specific cultural habits. The text points to Hungarian culture as a prime example. You have a unique brand of cultural pessimism, a blunt, straight honesty and temperament that simply doesn't exist in that Los Angeles teenager. And it extends to dietary habits that remain completely untouched by global trends, like cooking heavy stews laden with paprika, onions, and garlic, or the cultural reliance on palinka.
Let me pause you there, because for those listening who might not be familiar, palinka isn't just a beverage, right? It's a fruit brandy.
Exactly. It's a traditional fruit brandy. But more importantly, it is a localized social currency. The communal act of distilling it, sharing it with neighbors, using it to celebrate or mourn, that is a physical shared experience that forges local bonds. You cannot download that.
Fair point.
The text even mentions highly specific environmental interactions, like the persistence of the mysterious shelved toilet, the traditional Central European flat spuler.
Which, to clarify for our listeners, is a toilet design featuring a flat shelf that essentially forces you to inspect your own waste before flushing it away.
Right. And why does that matter? Because it reflects a deeply ingrained worldview about health monitoring, self-reliance, and confronting blunt physical reality. Or take behavioral norms like blowing one's nose in public loud as a trumpet, which the text highlights.
Yeah, I remember that part.
These aren't just trivial quirks. They are the daily, physical repetitions that form a worldview. A fast fashion t-shirt does not erase a localized temperament built on centuries of physical reality.
I agree. But we need to look at the psychology of why that t-shirt is chosen and what it represents internally.
Okay.
The text notes that in the past, traditional dressing was strictly dictated by local norms and geography. But fast fashion has fundamentally changed the underlying value system. People now prioritize a globalized standard of personal comfort over local tradition. When they are at home, they wear a tracksuit. When they visit relatives or go to the shop, they wear jeans and shirts. And the text notes this style never goes out of fashion, precisely because it is a global uniform.
A uniform of convenience, yes.
The text explicitly states that you should choose clothes which reflect your personality and taste. If your clothes reflect your personality and you're choosing to dress identically to an American teenager rather than your traditional cultural garb, the mechanism of your identity has shifted.
Wait, shifted how?
The dopamine loop of feeling connected to a global aesthetic has overwritten the desire for local approval. The globalized habit has overwritten the local one.
I come at it from a different way. You're mistaking the casualness of modernity for the erasure of tradition. Yes, people wear tracksuits when they're lounging in private where there's no social friction.
Right.
But what happens when the moment actually matters? The traditional expectations still absolutely govern significant life events.
Do they, though?
Absolutely. The material notes that for weddings, funerals, graduations, and opera evenings, that global uniform of jeans is entirely discarded. Men must wear suits and ties with elegant shoes.
True.
Women face the highly complex traditional task of matching evening dresses or skirts and blouses with specific accessories. And crucially, look at the generational tension described in the text. You have a mother forcing her child to wear a terrible white silk blouse and old-fashioned shoes with low heels, despite the child's preference for high heels to look taller.
But doesn't that tension prove the child's internal habit has already shifted away from the local tradition?
No, the conflict proves that local, generational authority still dictates behavior in the moments that bind a community together. The mechanism of habit formation here is delayed gratification and social sacrifice.
Oh, I see.
By forcing the child to wear something uncomfortable, the mother is teaching the child that individual comfort is secondary to collective cohesion. That is how character is forged. The mother's enforcement of tradition overrides the global comfort trend when it actually counts.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on that exact interaction. Is that formal wear actually a reflection of their true habit, or is it merely a costume they put on to appease the ghosts of the past?
A costume.
Think about the physical reality of that moment. The text mentions that when forced to wear these clothes for special occasions, the person can hardly wait to get home and take them off, to put their comfortable clothes back on.
Because tradition requires effort.
But if the tradition is literally uncomfortable, if the individual is counting the minutes until they can strip it off and return to their tracksuit, hasn't the globalized standard of comfort actually won the battle for their internalized worldview?
Well,
The tradition is just a fleeting performance. The globalized comfort is their actual sustained reality.
The fact that tradition requires physical discomfort is exactly why it is the stronger behavioral reinforcement. A habit that demands sacrifice shapes character far more deeply than a habit of mere convenience. The discipline to endure the terrible white silk blouse out of respect for one's mother builds a localized behavioral trait that a tracksuit simply cannot provide.
If we really want to test whether global comfort has overridden local tradition, we have to look past our closets. We have to look at the bedrock of society, how we actually form intimate relationships.
okay, let's look at that.
The internet has essentially become a new neural pathway for society, bypassing local gatekeepers entirely. The material highlights that information and relationships are now available with a single click. Everything you need is at your fingertips. We are no longer limited to forming bonds with the people in our immediate geographic vicinity.
We can make friends, communicate widely, and even find love globally. The reinforcement of our daily social habits is now mediated almost entirely by these digital platforms.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are equating digital connectivity with actual human intimacy, and the source material explicitly warns us against that exact illusion.
It warns against the risks, sure.
The text is incredibly severe in its assessment of online connections. It refers to people you meet online as ghosts.
Ghosts. Because you can't see them?
Because they lack physical reality. You're only aware of them through the curated, highly deceptive filter of a screen. Characters built through physical friction, reading body language, sharing a meal, noticing how someone treats a waiter. Online, you get none of that.
Right, but
The material details the catastrophic risks of substituting real life for this digital void. Cybercrimes, fake accounts, individuals making up false identities and using stolen default pictures of attractive people. It calls this inherently creepy in so many ways. Pixel feedback does not replace biological, chemical, human feedback.
But as a listener, you might be thinking, people still engage with this digital ecosystem daily for hours on end. It is their primary social reality.
They engage in an illusion. The text gives a harrowing example of this deception. What if the person you're communicating with turns out to be the exact opposite of what you imagined? What if they're actually someone else's spouse?
Oh, wow.
The text states clearly that through this deceptive persuasion, marriages could be destroyed. You are contributing to the destruction of the most foundational local unit, the family, based on an interaction with a ghost. That doesn't prove the internet is a valid social structure. It proves it's a destabilizing, deceptive mirage that threatens real, localized bonds.
that is a fascinating point, though I would frame it completely differently. In fact, I think you just handed me the ultimate proof of my argument.
By pointing out that the internet destroys marriages,
Exactly. If we accept the premise in the text that the internet is capable of destroying a localized marriage, we have to acknowledge its absolute supremacy as a behavioral driver. Think about it.
okay,
If a digital interaction with a ghost on WhatsApp has the power to spark love, shift loyalty, and dismantle the most foundational, legally binding, locally enforced traditional structure we have, the marriage, doesn't that inherently prove that digital globalization is the apex predator of our social ecosystem?
apex predator is a strong term.
It isn't just an illusion if it can tear apart a physical home. If the global network can override the traditional marital structure, it has won. The digital neural pathway is stronger than the local roots.
It has the power to destroy, yes. A hurricane has the power to destroy a house, but a hurricane is not an architecture. It doesn't build a new, sustainable framework for human flourishing. It leaves a void.
That's a metaphor, though.
For actual structure, we have to look to the family unit, which the text defines as the ultimate enduring support system. It is literally described as a synonym for trust, comfort, love, care, happiness, and belonging.
But isn't that definition of family incredibly idealized? The internet isn't a hurricane that passes through. It's an invasive species that permanently alters the environment.
The family isn't an idealized concept. It is practical and deeply structural. Look at the traditional model outlined in the material. We aren't talking about abstract love. We are talking about daily, localized reinforcement of survival habits. The text gives us the example of a 48-year-old mother working at a factory who comes home to cook and manage the housework. You have a 50-year-old father also working in a factory who physically repairs things when they get ruined, builds wardrobes from scratch, and provides essential life advice based on local realities.
And I don't deny that model existed, but
Let me finish painting this picture, because the mechanisms here are vital. You have siblings taking the time to coach each other in complex, localized subjects like German history, literature, and grammar. This is an ecosystem of mutual survival.
right.
Family members become lifelines, deciding an individual's success or failure by providing a localized support system. And this extends across time. The text notes the cultural permanence of Hungarian parents continuing to support their children financially, even after those children have families of their own.
Okay.
That localized, intergenerational safety net
shapes human character through daily, unavoidable reliance on each other. A WhatsApp message simply cannot build a wardrobe or pay your rent when you're struggling.
I completely agree that the traditional family was that ecosystem. But my argument is that modern economic and global pressures are fundamentally fracturing this specific setup. The text provides overwhelming evidence that this traditional structure is no longer the default reality.
No longer the default.
First, it acknowledges the massive rise of single-parent families, largely due to high divorce rates, where one person carries the huge responsibility of earning a living and raising children simultaneously. The bandwidth for that traditional habit reinforcement is simply gone.
But those are variations of the family, not the end of it. Extended families, nuclear families, single-parent families, they still operate on the fundamental principle of blood and localized support.
They operate under immense modern strain that forces them to rely on globalized, external structures. The material describes modern parenting as a state where mothers feel isolated and exhausted, and fathers feel neglected.
Well, it's difficult, sure.
Managing childcare now requires external reliance, paid parental leave policies, external babysitters, or after-school clubs run by institutions just so parents can work full-time in a modern economy. And look at the ultimate fracturing the text brings up, the British empty nest syndrome.
Where children leave for university.
Exactly. They leave their families entirely for higher education. They live away from home and work part-time in pubs, cafes, and shops to support themselves. Their daily habit reinforcement is no longer coming from a 50-year-old father building a wardrobe in the living room. It's coming from their peers, their shift manager at the cafe, and the broader global economy they're participating in. The local gatekeepers have been replaced.
That is a fair assessment of the intense economic pressures families face. But I must return to the concept of the generation gap mentioned in the text. When generations live together, say, grandparents taking care of children because the parents are working, the text admits this creates tension and conflict because different generations have different values and ways of thinking.
Which inherently proves my thesis. If putting multiple generations of a local family in the same house creates severe tension and conflict because their values are so different, it means the modern, learned habits of the younger generation have already overwritten the traditional familial cohesion.
I don't see it that way.
The outside world has gotten in. They no longer share the same blueprint. The modern world has already fractured their shared reality, even when they live under the same roof.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that tension is exactly how character is forged? You don't negotiate with an Instagram feed, you just scroll past it if you don't like it. But in a family, you cannot just scroll past your grandmother. The fact that they argue, and as the text explicitly states, always make up, is the very mechanism of localized habit formation.
Because they're forced to.
Exactly. They are forced to negotiate, forced to empathize, forced to adapt. That friction doesn't mean the family has failed. It means the family is actively doing the hard, messy work of assimilating new ideas while maintaining its foundational bonds.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
It builds psychological resilience, whereas the internet builds fragility by only showing you what you want to see. The text concludes with the narrator expressing a deep, overriding desire to build a similarly large, loving, and caring family in the future to provide a peaceful environment for their own children. Despite all the modern pressures, the exhaustion, the divorces, the empty nests, the fundamental human aspiration remains the traditional, localized family unit. We still crave that local soil.
It is a profound tension, and I think summarizing our positions really highlights the philosophical crossroads we are currently standing at. From my perspective, the ubiquity of the internet and social media functioning as a new neural pathway, the homogenization of global fast fashion allowing us to adopt foreign identities instantly, and the clear fracturing of traditional living arrangements into diverse, modern structures all point to one reality.
Which is?
Our daily environment, and therefore the mechanism that builds our habits, is now dictated by global modernity. The blueprint for who we become is no longer drawn by our immediate ancestors. It is crowdsourced from the global network.
And my position remains that despite the influx of fast fashion and the dizzying speed of digital communication, the inherent risks and deceptions of the modern world only reinforce our need for a traditional, physical lifeline.
Right.
The local traits, from deeply ingrained temperaments down to tactile dietary habits like paprika stews, or even how we confront health through something as seemingly mundane as a traditional shelved toilet, prove that our core identity is intimately tied to our physical geography. The foundation is still poured in local soil, even if the modern world keeps trying to build a digital house on top of it.
I think where we naturally converge is the acknowledgement that human habit is undeniably malleable. We are clearly observing a profound transition phase in human history. Individuals today are caught right in the middle, trying to balance the efficiency, reach, and dopamine of global influences with the deep-seated psychological need for local tradition and physical friction.
Absolutely. We are attempting to harmonize the vast conveniences of the modern era with the inherited, localized heritage that gives our lives actual meaning, resilience, and structure. The source material offers so many deeper avenues to explore regarding how these macro, global shifts affect the deeply micro reality of our personal relationships.
It certainly does. We've really only scratched the surface of how our daily environments dictate who we ultimately become. We started by asking what architecture shapes us, whether we're built by the physical, local soil beneath our feet or the ubiquitous global data in the air around us. As the scaffolding of society continues to shift so rapidly, perhaps the most important question isn't just where our habits come from, but what kind of structure we are consciously choosing to build with them. Until next time.